All right, it's my distinct pleasure here. Guillermo Mash for KZFR 90.1 FM, People Powered Radio. We have on the line Gabriella Duncan from Seattle, Washington, whom I did a wonderful long-form interview about a year ago. Gabriella, it's nice to hear your voice again after this length of time.
Yes, it's been good to see what you're up to and watching your posts and things.
Same here, Gabrielle. I have a lot of respect for what you're doing up there. You and Rex, because Rex said, I said I was going to reach out to you, and he said, make sure you tell her that Rex says, I love you. So Rex says, I love you.
Oh, man.
Via Guillermo
He's so awesome.
He is. He's
a great guy.
I love his Say Hello campaign. We're going to be pushing that. I just love everything about that. This little segment, as I mentioned, is about solutions to homelessness. And I know you're doing some wonderful, wonderful work up there in the Seattle, Washington area around harm reduction. So maybe you could kind of land on that and tell us about your program so we can promote that a little bit, or your project.
Well, I actually kind of, have lived in a tent city and lived and walked with very closely with some friends who suffer from addiction. And I know a lot of people say it's a choice and yada yada, and really it isn't after a while. It's managing illness. You're just managing symptoms that you created, and it's hard to understand how you could, disconnect and get away from that once it's got a hold of you. And so there are safe consumption sites that Washington Vocal is putting up around the city where a person can go and get the fresh needles they need and be where they're in a safe injection site. It's not on public sidewalk. It's very respectfully treating human beings with an addiction. And so I'm working on an art piece that's going in there that is actually from real pieces of paper and a website that my daughter and I had kind of written called The Drug Zombie. And I no longer had the money to pay for it when I became homeless. But so I've taken excerpts out of that and then some of the actual factual things that have happened during their time of addiction, which really alerted me to the fact of how necessary it is to find a way to compassionately and completely help those who suffer from it, because it's hard to stay away from it if you're on the streets, and you can't get clean if you live with a bunch of people that aren't. And so it's complicated, and we push people out on the fringes like that, and then to try and get them into treatment has been a nightmare. I have walked the system and seen and heard the phone calls of people being told, 4 more weeks or 4 more months, and it's unreal to me as to how that works. I think people have a really unbalanced idea of how it is when you try to go get help. And so that's my biggest thing right now that I'm working on, is supporting the safe consumption sites and supporting safe drug use and the use of Narcan, having it on hand, knowing how it works, that sort of thing.
Well, I haven't posted yet. I had a brilliant piece from the Clarion Mural Project. I spent hours in that area in the Mission District, but they have a whole... I'm going to post that today in your honor, because it's a beautiful, beautiful cartoon meme. It's a portrait. It goes down like an infograph about Narcan. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe for the listeners to get a little bit more affinity with the situation, because I really like what you said, Gabriella, about it's really hard to break your addiction if you're living with a bunch of people that are addicted. Tends to be, if you don't have any money and there's any kind of quote-unquote help available, they throw a whole bunch of people together that are addicted in a small living space and say, hey, figure it out. And oh, by the way, if we test you dirty for drugs, you're out of here. And maybe you could speak to a little bit of how stupid that process is.
Right. It just feeds the system more. It almost looks like it is made so that recidivism is a guaranteed thing. Guaranteed.
Well,
when you have to live like that.
The other thing that this wonderful young lady that I spoke with yesterday had mentioned, she said, recovery is all about, relapse. And not all about it. I don't think that's the exact phrase, but she said if you're in recovery and you're a serious drug or alcohol addict, you're going to have relapses. So I think it's really inhumane to bring people into programs and then kind of call them in the office going, sorry, you passed your P test, go back living under the bridge. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
I think that's a punitive model that doesn't work. It's ineffective with adults, and with behavioral studies and things that I kind of, when I start to get curious about something, I read as much as I can get my hands on, regarding that subject. And then plus being a treatment foster parent, and being trained in crisis intervention, you begin to see how nurturing and patience are more necessary than anything at the point of absolute addiction. Because things happen, right? I mean, I suffered through a lot with my children as they suffered because I chose to go through it with them. I chose to stay present. I chose to try every avenue I could possibly get my hands on to try and help them in some way. For instance, going down and getting them a safe needle use card and then having a police officer tear it up and say, well, that's not good here. And so you see how on one side of the system it's all very lopsided. It's very lopsided and people are hurting. The average drug addict is not an older gentleman anymore. It's a high school student. And would you take that high school student and give up on them when they've only lived 15 years of their life? It takes a lifetime to accumulate that experience and whatnot. That should tell you right there that there's a problem because that person is that young and they're already medicating for some reason or another.
You know what? If you say you're having needles lying around in public space, give people safe places to dispose of their needles and get new ones. It works. So it's really frustrating. I mean, and I just kind of think, Gabrielle, in a way, the whole system's kind of geared towards, I can't imagine people aren't stupid enough or silly enough to go, we have an issue with needles in the community. Oh, let's solve the problem. Let's do this. Oh, we can't do that because, that's enabling drug use. No, I mean, someone's addicted to heroin. They're going to figure out how to get their needle and what to do with it. And, I've talked to a few heroin addicts and people that have seen it. It's like, once you've shot up heroin, a lot of times the last thing you're worried about or even thinking about is what the hell you're going to do with the needle. So it's just stupid.
Right. Well, someone said something to me one time. The reason that he puts his needle out in plain view is because the people that go through the park with the grabbers can pick it up and there are no needle boxes. So he would put it at the edge of the bushes, away from the playground, because there was nowhere to put it. He didn't want to put it in a garbage can. And he said, but I've watched people come through this park because I've lived here and they'll pick it up. The people that clean will pick it up with the grabbers and put it in a box. Basically how he disposed of his is instead of him going around saying, I don't have it, I can't do it, I'm going to drop it, he looked in his environment, which is what we should be doing, right? We should be looking at the cause and effect of our environments and what addiction is doing to people, because people should matter first and foremost above everything. But since we're so preoccupied with being perfect and having the right car and the this and the that and the whatever, we become inhuman. And all of that feeds into when you're not good enough, that not good enough. I can't do it right and I can't do it like you do it, so I'm going to go out here and live in isolation and marginalization and live in the fringe. And we force that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick summary on that program. Does the program include safe needles, but does it include a safe place to use as well? Or
well, the safe consumption sites are an entire site where you can go safely use, be monitored, have a clean setup, have clean rigs, everything ready to go, and then you're watched for a little bit of time, and then you can leave. Because I think don't quote me on this because I really, as much as I look at it, I still don't know enough. There's a certain amount of time within which the probability of overdose comes along. And so they hold on, you sit there, you wait, it's done in a dignified manner, and instead of our needles being out all over our sidewalks and finding people spinning bubbles down on the corner, you've got them in these safe consumption sites where they can go, and hopefully that'll change the stigma of things too, because your children are going to have to grow up in a world of other people using, and children meet children, don't they? And you never know when the Romeo and Juliet story's going to happen, and you end up with a child that ends up with someone who suffered from that addiction too.
So not
and
only
helping everybody get through it, and not only that, then they face the repercussions of whatever that person went through as an addict.
I think the other thing that's not covered enough about those safe consumption sites is, not only is it a very, very good use of the harm reduction model, but a lot of them have social workers and stuff built in, so that if the guy walks in and goes, this is the day I don't want to ever use heroin again because thank you so much for giving me this space. They've got resources to help the person instead of being lying
right,
in the park.
Exactly. It's got, and so it's kind of like community peer mentoring in a way. You get a person into a safe consumption site and you go, hey, I just want to give you this list of resources again for maybe when you get ready to do this, And here's this list of resources, and, that'll be there. But the thing is, Guillermo, are those resources really there? I'm walking with somebody who is in serious condition and cannot access anything. And even one program rule was, no, you need to be sober for 6 months in order to come into our program as an alcoholic. And you're going, if I've been sober for 6 months, why do I need to do that? There's really kind of ridiculous, and I don't quote me on that one either because I barely looked the rules over, but it's kind of the gist of it. But there's just all these hoops that we start asking people who are so incredibly challenged, either with living outside, and they can't hide their addiction behind four walls. They can't hide when they argue. They can't hide when they're upset with anybody in a community like in a tent city. When you have a home, you can be an addict and work a job, and you're okay. There's nothing wrong with you. But if you're going to go out there and look like that grubby guy on the street, we're going to start judging. We're going to start making it more horrible to be a drug addict. And different communities think different ways. I lived all across Seattle, different little pockets of places, and the attitudes are different towards people. And some people are very cherishing and nurturing of humans, and then you have others that are just really just not fair.
Well, I appreciate this conversation, Gabriella. If there's anything you'd like to expand upon or add that you'd like our listeners here at KZFR 90.1 FM to know about the Seattle, Washington area, for listeners just joining, we're talking with Gabriella Duncan, a longtime activist and advocate for the homeless community up there in Seattle. What do you got, Gabriella?
Well, I think I would say we're only going to be as advanced as we treat each other. And if we were to treat each other more respectfully and give each other a little more benefit of the doubt, because we've learned this cliche, we get 2 chances at everything, right? There's got to be 10 and 12 and 15 chances. There has to be, because everybody develops at a different rate of speed. Everybody has a different emotional IQ than they do intelligence, and we gotta hang in there. We gotta figure it out.
Thanks so much for that, Gabriella. It sounded a lot like what Rex said. You guys are definitely a good team up there in Seattle, Washington. It's always a joy hearing your voice and following you on social media.
Well, thank you so very much, and I really appreciate your work, and I appreciate you taking the time to call and so I can plug the safe consumption sites, and life will get a little better with all of us, we hope.
Amen to that.